Hello and welcome back. Today I am drawing the first 4 days of Inktober. Now, I know I am a little bit behind, but in my defense, I spent the first 3 days of Inktober at the emergency vet with my poodle, so I think I'm owed just a little bit of slack. But I'm still trying to catch up. So if you want to see me completing days of Inktober, hopefully, you can follow me on my Instagram or Twitter. I always post the finished products there, and hopefully I'll be able to get more videos out with the finished products as well. So the first day of Inktober's prompt was fish, and instantly I had an idea for this. I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to do the silhouette of a giant fish in the background with a small boat on top of it. I thought this would make good use of a dark shape in the background, as well as letting me do some more textured kind of shading hatching on the boat. And that was one of my big goals for this Inktober, is to practice my hatching a little bit instead of always doing either a painterly or a cell shade, because there are so many different kinds of ways to shade and I want to be amazing at them all. So also, for those who don't know, I'm currently doing an art giveaway. To enter the art giveaway, you only have to follow me on Instagram or Twitter, and then you have to share one of my YouTube videos, and you'll be entered into a raffle to win a black and white illustration in the style of my Inktober illustrations. So if you'd like to possibly get a free commission from me, head on over to my social media, follow me, share my video, and then tag me when you do. So here I am trying the hatching. This illustration took me a little while because, again, I'm not experienced in hatching, so this was my first time outside of the self-portrait that I did traditionally trying to hatch. And hatching digitally is kind of challenging because I wanted all of the lines to look very sketchy, scratchy, traditional. So I end up going back over the fish because I feel like with the textured bone on top, the really solidly black fish looks a little bit out of place. So I go back and I try to give the fish some texture. And my Inktober illustrations progressively get more textured, and I'm actually really enjoying it. I would love to shade this way more often. My one regret about the boat is I kind of regret not making it a wooden boat, giving it some knots and curls in the wood, some boards at the bottom of the boat. I didn't really do that because, first of all, the reference I was looking at was a plexiglass boat, so it didn't have that texture. And secondly, because you were at such a far away angle, I worried that so much detail in the wood of the boat would distract from the hatching or make you not exactly know what it was. But when I sent it around to some people, some of them couldn't really tell it was a boat, so I didn't add very much texture to the fish. It's just the slightest little bit. I ended up doing a clipping mask over top of it and just adding texture that way. I was also using a different brush this time around. Usually I'm using the Inking Thick and Thin brush, but I had the Inking Thick and Thin was doing this thing I hate on Photoshop sometimes where the lines are kind of bubbled almost. I'm not quite sure how to describe it, but I was using a round oval brush, and to finish the illustration off, I did some ripples on top to really make it look like the fish was below the surface, and did a clipping mask over that and changed some of the colors up there. So here's my Inktober Day 1 finished illustration, fish. This was day 2, but I did not do it on day 2. I'm pretty sure I did it on day 5. I'm very behind. But day 2's prompt was Wisp. And I sketched around with this one for a little bit, and something that really inspired me for this one was Don't Starve. I was specifically looking at the way the hair sort of curls in the characters and how it's so sharp and angular, and I wanted to do something similar. Because I usually do a lot of very smooth, curved, floaty lines, and for this one I really wanted to have choppy, angular edges to match with the sketchy style, because I didn't really think that flowing would necessarily look the greatest with my newly learned hatching. I also redrew probably one half of this gravestone so many times because I just ended up copying it to the other, so I only really had to do half the work, a bonus. I found a really, really good reference for a gravestone that I thought looked fantastic. So if I can actually find that reference, I will leave it in the description down below. So yes, that was definitely heavily referenced from another illustration. Something that I did mess up on this one, I think, is I feel like that piece of Wisp floatiness on the left-hand side of the screen, sorry, checking my hands to figure out my right and left. I think that wispy floatiness on the left-hand side of the screen by her elbow, I think it's a little bit out of place, because it doesn't quite look like it's coming off her hair, and it also doesn't quite look like it's coming off her quote-unquote tail. So to fix that, I think I would have added just like one more chunk of Wisp in between the end of her tail and that little bit there. I was just trying to make the composition a little bit more balanced, because, you know, on one side you've got a lot of hair and the curve in her tail, and on the other you just have the end of the tail. So I think in trying to balance it, I didn't quite get it right. I also kind of regret the tombstones in the background, I erased them. And I was really trying to only use black and white for these illustrations, no grays. So in erasing them, I kind of ended up with this mid-tone gray that did push them into the background like I wanted, but I was adding this gray to the illustration that I didn't really want. I was imagining I was doing this traditionally with just a set of technical pens, and I wouldn't have been able to do that with technical pens. I also made a little bit of a mistake here. The circles in the gravestone are supposed to be like holes punched out of it, so you can't see her body in the background. I don't know if I ended up fixing that on video, but I did go back and fix it in the illustration. I'm not sure which one I put at the end here, but I really enjoyed shading the tombstone. I thought it was so much fun. It wasn't cross-hatching like I did with the rest of her body. It was very straight parallel hatching to each other, and I love the way it looks, especially the circle in the background and how dark the inner rings of the circles are. Again, very heavily referenced from another drawing of a gravestone. I really hope I can find it. I'm definitely going to try to find it. See, I do go back over those tombstones in the background and make them a darker color, but nah, I still don't love the way they look. If I could, I would probably grab them and shift them a little bit. But there is Inktober Day 2, Wisp, the finished illustration. Inktober Day 3 was bulky, and I instantly had an idea for this one as well. As soon as I started thinking about it, I was like, I want to make a monster design. And the inspiration for this one was sort of, I guess, tanks in zombie games, or perhaps mutants in a game like Resident Evil or Amnesia or something like that. So my thought was I wanted to make sort of a body horror thing, with one half of this guy's body being extremely muscular and quote-unquote bulky, and one half being normal. Perhaps he tried to take some sort of potion or serum or medicine that would make him big and strong, but it didn't work like advertised or expected, so he ended up sort of being ripped apart. It's a little gross. I'm probably gonna put like a little bit of a gross warning on this video when I upload it, because specifically I wanted to make it look like he grew too quickly on that one side and his skin was just shredded. This one was also really fun. I enjoyed drawing the muscles. For one of my classes in university, I had to take a figure drawing class, and part of that class we drew bones and muscles and correct human anatomy. So I don't think the muscles on this are 100% anatomically correct. I would be very surprised if they were, but they are relatively correct. I think you could look at a skeleton, or not a skeleton, an image of the muscular system, is that correct? And look at this and say, yeah, I can see basically the muscles that you were looking at. I didn't have that sketchbook with me, but I definitely knew how I wanted to shade it. I also didn't really want to draw his face. I kind of wanted to hide it, so I figured if the rest of this guy's body is tearing and exploding, perhaps his face did too, so I bandaged it up, and I do some hatching on it that makes it look like it might be bleeding a little bit, but I think if I do have a regret with this one, something that I would change, I think that some of the details were lost in how heavy my hatching was at the end. Like in the parts that were ripped, I did some drips of blood. You can see I just drew some like saliva dripping out of his mouth, like his tongue is swollen and he can't swallow. I think that some of those details were lost in some of the heavier hatching. I just wanted to make it all cohesive and match, and as you can see, I'm doing some pretty heavy hatching on the muscles to draw attention to them and also to give them some 3D dynamicism sort of thing. Maybe if I was doing this in color, I might also have made the muscles a little bit more like wet looking, drippy looking. But again, I was trying not to go too gross with this, mostly because I didn't want to have to look up reference images for bloody muscles. That sounds terrifying. I am actually really happy with how the hatching turned out. It took forever because I was, having to individually hatch each muscle, which I usually do not have to do when drawing people. But I do think they ended up looking like muscle tissue, and I'm very happy about that. The hand was a little bit challenging because I'm not exactly sure how the muscles in the hands are shaped, and I know that some of them just have like very, very little muscle at all, so that was confusing. I did specifically try to hatch on the face to make it look like he had a bridge of his nose, and also that maybe his eyes were bleeding or sinking into his head. I had a lot of fun with this one. One of the most challenging things was trying to get his chest to look right, just because one half is very clearly bigger than the other. And so while I was drawing this, I was like, anatomically this isn't correct. And then I had to keep reminding myself that no, it's not correct and it's not supposed to be. I do think I really enjoy the pose. I think there's a lot of weight of him leaning on his fist and his leg. I wish I could have made it look a little bit more like that, perhaps by bending his elbow or something, but I did crop the image in a little bit because there is a lot of weight on the left-hand side and not a lot of weight on the right-hand side. But this is my finished illustration. I added some shadows underneath him, and that was day 3, bulky. Day 4, I actually did before days 2 and 3, and the prompt was radio. I did part of this on a stream. I also recorded it. The sketch layer I did on the stream, but also unfortunately that segment of video ended up being corrupted, so I no longer have it. But I guess we're just starting with the line art then. I also pretty much instantly had an idea with this one. It didn't turn out exactly like I was hoping, and I think that's because there was just some logistics problems with the idea that I didn't fully think about before I started drawing. I wanted it to make I wanted to make it look like there was an actual person's head trapped inside the radio, not that he was a creature with a radio head. But the radio is not big enough to hold the size of a human head that would go with this body. I also had a very, very hard time figuring out the anatomy for this, so I'm kind of glad I lost the sketch layer because it was a lot of sketches of me trying to figure out his anatomy. Also, drawing the radio was surprisingly challenging because I didn't want to add in too much detail, but if you don't add in enough, it doesn't quite look like a radio. I didn't want things to distract. I knew that the very, very important part of the radio that I needed was that speaker because I wanted to make it look like an eye. And I did put a lot of emphasis on making sure that specific feature looked like an eye and had a lot of detail and shading and lighting put into it. Just because I knew that would be what drew the viewer's eye. For those that don't know, if there is something that looks like an eye or a face in an illustration, we're automatically drawn to it. It's an evolutionary thing to keep us safe. So if you see faces, you're kind of drawn to it naturally. I thought the story behind this guy might be that he can only communicate in Morse code. So the Morse code in the background, to my knowledge, I actually don't know Morse code. To my knowledge, it says help me over and over again. And I thought that, I could make his antenna look like it was broadcasting out. I actually had a lot of trouble shading this one because I started out filling in things with solid black, and then I tried to start hatch shading the body, and it wasn't working out. So I tried to, do a solid shade of the body, and I was going to go back in and start hatching on top of it. And it looks okay, but for some reason I didn't like it, so I scrapped that and I start trying to shade again. And at this point I'm just kind of frustrated. So instead of, doing meticulous hatching that's following the curve of the body, or doing a hard cell shade and then going along with it, I just kind of started scribbling. I also wanted him to be wrapped up in cables, which was a lot harder to do than I thought, but I do like the way it turned out, especially the ones on his arms and fingers. I think those look really, really good, and I'm very happy with them. They do kind of get a little lost in the hatching, but I think the ones that you can see look interesting, and they add a little bit of, that trapped feeling that I was going for with having his head trapped in the radio. The way I'm shading like below the waist on him gets a little bit uncomfortable because, I don't know, something about his anatomy, I was just like highlighting the wrong thing. So I give him a little pair of like briefs and then I still don't like it. So I end up actually cropping this one down quite a bit. I thought when I shaded in the speaker, like darkened it up, it looked a lot like a mouth. And I thought that was really cool as well. It looked like he's kind of screaming or in agony or something. I shrunk down the background, cropped it a little bit, and then just put some finishing touches on it. I tried to highlight a little bit on the wires, but I didn't think it looked the greatest, so I didn't do too much of that. But that is Inktober Day 4 radio. If I can catch up, I will do my best to do so. But those were the first 4 days of Inktober. Again, be sure to go to my social media to get in on this giveaway and keep up with the rest of the work that I'm doing for Inktober. So thank you again so much for watching. Leave a like if you liked, subscribe if you want to see more, and have a lovely day and all that jazz.